All right. Let's just make sure that's all working. Cool. And why is my capture card not capturing my game? It's always something trying to do these streams, I swear. There we go. All right. That's all good. Perfect. Okay. So, let's I guess get started. So, hey guys, we're back for another fun week of GBGW content, GBM, but yeah. Oh man, that light's bright. I had to do a bunch of little stuff around my desk here, so a lot of settings are off now. Yeah, same new number of alts, great. Yeah, so like the last few days, well, not really the last few days, I'd say since like maybe Friday, it's just kind of been like a rush. So, on, I believe it was about Wednesday last week. Just lead Gundam break for the other Gundam game here. No, Eternal's gone dark. I haven't heard any other progress after the CBT we just had. So it's really just waiting now. But anyways, so my old computer setup, because the way that this room is, I have a one plug for pretty much my entire setup. So like, there's an outlet just around the corner of the cabinet over here, and in there we have a heater for this area and a like an air freshener effectively, right? Keep the back room warm and all that. And then the other outlet for this room is behind the television there. And what I've done, I just got this really long extension cord that runs from there underneath the carpet, the couch, and everything to come up under my desk on the side. And that's where I had a uninterrupted power supply plugged in. The battery on that died mid-ish last week. So I had to do a bunch of rearranging to get my setup working again, because it turns out that the UPS had been subsidizing a lot of the power usage of my setup, and I hadn't realized it. So effectively, my computer needed, I don't know the actual measurements, but instead of using, like 100% of what the outlet was able to give, it was using like 115, 120%. So the UPS during the night would charge up to full, and then during the day, instead of sitting at full and as an emergency thing, it actually was slowly draining, trying to make sure everything had all the power it needed. So I'm down to 2 monitors instead of 3 for right now. I had to unplug a bunch of extra hardware and stuff that I wasn't really using but had in case I needed it. And I'm waiting for a new battery to come in because that UPS battery is also blown. It wasn't holding a charge very well. So yeah, it was exciting. But because of that, a lot of my settings are now a little wonky, because instead of having 3 monitors, it's 2 monitors, and not a lot of my hardware really likes that very much. Anyways, we're here for Gundam. Let's go over the Gundam stuff. If you haven't already watched it talking about Gundam, last week I did post a video talking about the Gundam Heavy Arms. I got early hands-on for it. It does come out, I believe it's tomorrow, actually, March 8th. Sounds right. So if you wanted to know more about it, or maybe you haven't heard of Gundam Evolution, you want to check it out, free-to-play shooter, check out that video. Good stuff. Honestly, I love the way that the Heavy Arms felt playing Evolution. That was like a really well-made whole thing. Anyways, let's get cracking on this. So, we have the, how do you pronounce it? Geminas? We have that as our welfare. We had the Blitz Gundam last week, which I was really happy about, actually seeing the Blitz Gundam. So it's always nice. More seed representation, please. Not nearly enough. Okay. G-Unit coin. Let's take a look at our welfare, starting from the top. So, while Gundam type buff EX skill effect up 15%, Okay. Just as kind of a reminder slash heads up on the way that buff this specific thing works. If a buff says it gives, you know, like 49% to your shot attack or something, or 30% physical boost or whatever, just add 15% flat to it. That's the way that the numbers work. So 15% for a welfare, nothing to scoff at. That's actually a relatively high modifier for a welfare. Not the highest. I believe we've seen this go up to like 20 or 25% on welfares before. I may be mistaken though. But 15% is pretty much the average, what you'd expect to see on a welfare. So cool. It's not underperforming, so to speak. All right, let's take a look at our stats here. Okay. So we're looking at about, that's what, 3,900 or so shot attack. As far as welfare heads go, typically we don't see them break 4K. We have seen a few of them do it, but overwhelmingly we see it just below 4K for like the really high end ones, more like 3.6, 3.8, kind of in that brackets where we more or less see shot heads sit for welfare. Going past 4K is a real anomaly. Seeing this hovering just below that line, you know, kind of high 3,800, low 3,900. No real complaints on that. Those are good numbers. Melee is a little more on the token side. It's sitting at like 1,900 and change or so, maybe a little under that. And as far as melee heads go, this is clearly more focused on shot. It does have a little bit of melee on there though, which is nice to see. But yeah, it's not bad melee attack pretty much on this head. And then Gundam type ace exclusive tags. So Gundam type, a very accessible, powerful word tag, activates a ton of really good traits and stuff. So yeah, really nothing to complain about there. I need to my headset. Oh, that's better. I don't have to worry about my hair flopping in my eyes. I need to get a haircut. All right, that was the other thing. So I had these really nice like Sennheiser headphones I loved using, but the cable on them started to go. Because what happens, right? I'm sitting here and the cable I wired around and up over my desk and came over so it wasn't caught in the under area. But whenever I moved my headphones around, the cable would always wrap around the arm of my chair. So the second I would turn, my headset would start getting pulled off my desk and the cable would fray a little bit. And I guess it got too much. It was around Friday-ish. But the cable finally, it just stopped properly broadcasting audio, so. When I heard the beta tester liked a lot about it, but there were a few key issues with the development system's not going to fly in its current state. If you're talking about Eternal, that's a very interesting take. I didn't get to play it myself, if you remember. For whatever reason, they had locked the beta test to America only, so people or certain regions, I should say specifically, Canada wasn't included in there, so even though I got CBT access, I couldn't actually play the game, because it just wasn't allowing me region-wise, which was really sad, honestly. I was really looking forward to playing Eternal and digging through it and kind of picking apart everything about it and figuring it out as a gacha game. But I didn't get access to it. I had to live vicariously through the other MC. So, but I don't really know enough about the development system they had because again, didn't play it hands-on. So I wish I did. I'm really looking forward to the next beta test so I can actually sit down and play it. I can always field a question to the devs and be like, "Hey guys, you know what's going on with that Eternal game that you?" This is kind of what Radio's silent about. Yeah. I'm still waiting for GBO2. Heartbreaking. Anyways, let's focus on this. Need some more time in the oven. Yeah, I would rather they take it back, redevelop systems that may be lackluster, and then release a proper finished product instead of something that's kind of like half-baked. Because once you've released it, it's very hard to go back and re-release it with fixed features, especially if it's something as important as the development system they had, right? So I can respect that it takes a lot of time to make sure it comes out. You only get one launch, right? And if your launch goes really bad, that's pretty much it for your game these days because there's just so much coming out daily. Anyways, GBN. So the Geminas head, good shot attack. For a shot head, very good melee attack. The trait for a welfare is pretty much as expected. The word tags, both of them very, very workable and usable. Ace exclusive, a core shooter tag, and Gundam type is just a very powerful all-around tag. Works on a bunch of traits, like I said. It does give you a little more shot attack, as this does seem to be a little more shot-centric, so it kind of feeds into it. Good tags, good stats. The trait is expected of a welfare, effectively. All right, torso. Let's take a look at that awakening. PX system activation. All right, raise your speed by 20%, raise your melee attack by 39%, raise your vernier capacity by 25%. Vernier capacity and speed, pretty much the bog standard for these types of awakenings. Looking at the melee attack, 39% boost. Honestly, yeah, for a welfare, that's really high. So when it comes to welfare awakenings, buffs in this vein, we typically see 29% with the extra additions on there. Because whenever there's more than one thing that it does, it typically devalues the primary stat buff by 10%, 15%, whatever. So we would see 29% melee attack boost with speed up, vernier capacity up, whatever. Seeing this at 39% with those extra buffs, nice. That's actually on the higher end as far as welfares go. One button, you get a nice buff. I'm not a big fan of the speed and vernier capacity. I don't find a ton of use in them, but then again, I do primarily play shot machines more so than I do melee. So it's a mileage may vary kind of deal. But as far as awakenings go, I don't really see much of an issue with this one. Gundam type ace exclusive, same word tags as the previous part. Awesome. Now for stats, before I even really look at the stats, whenever we're looking at welfare torsos, we typically expect to see 1,000 as a baseline. Once you go past 1,000, that's kind of where we start having like different, I guess, brackets. Like up to 1,200 is pretty much like the, all right, cool, you know, it's a welfare. Once we see, you know, like 1,200 to 1,300, 1,400, that's like, all right, this is pretty good. Once it goes past like 15, 16, 1,700, that's kind of where it's like, the stats on this are kind of nuts, right? Once you go past those, that's really high up as far as welfares go. Looking at this right off the bat, just default over 2,000 melee attack. As far as welfare torsos go, that is way up there offensively statted wise. So that's really cool. And then for shot, even though it has just under 1,000 base, it gets a lot from the carryover. We're sitting at like what, 1,600 or something like that shot attack. So 2,000 plus like what, it's 100 and change carryover, so like 2,150 or something in your melee attack and like 1,600 in your shot. Just offensively statted after carryovers, this is really like sitting comfortably for a welfare. Definitely really, really up there. So that's pretty cool. Nice EX skill, really powerful word tags, good stats. Nice. I mean, Final Fantasy XIV got a second life after it's crafted for. So here's the thing that you have to remember though. When Final Fantasy got its relaunch, it was a very different gaming like ecosystem that we had at that time. Right now, if I'm a mobile game and I launch and my game doesn't function right, it's slow, it's buggy, it crashes a lot, whatever, you're scaring off tons of players that have hundreds of other options. They could just wait a couple of months and the next big flavor of the month release, for example, Ether Gazer. It's like a soft hybrid between Honkai Impact and like, I guess more like, yeah, actually no, it's like you take Punishing Grey Raven but soften a bunch of the combat mechanics of it, right? That game, even though it's, in my opinion, I look at it and go, this is really like mediocre at best. They took all the really cool systems that PGR had and just watered them all down, and that's fine, you know, but it's effectively the casuals PGR with effectively stolen art assets, let's be real. Anyways, they have that as an option, right? So if you release a game and something like Ether Gazer comes out, or back when Nikke launched and Path to Nowhere and all those other games, there's a ton of competition in the mobile market these days. Every month, every 2 months, some big title is dropping, trying to get everyone's attention, big marketing cycles and everything. If you release your game and it doesn't do excellent and you're competing against that kind of stuff, you're done. The only way you're really going to be saved is if the IP carries you, or there's something just so amazing about the game, people are willing to stick around and deal with crappy aspects of the game for a short while you fix it. Whether that's some kind of niche related thing, whether it's people just being horny on main, whatever. But unlike when Final Fantasy had its really bad first iteration and then went back in the oven and came back out again, times have completely changed. You really cannot do that anymore, because when you go back for a relaunch, you're just going to get flooded with people going, oh yeah, this game was really bad on its first launch. And we've also had other examples of mobile games going back, releasing, and just being crap again. And then coming back into development, coming back out and being crap again. I can't remember the name of the mobile game, but it had like 3 re-releases before it finally died. Right? So I get what you're saying. You know, games can come back if they have a bad launch. It's just exponentially more difficult to do it these days than it was, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. Just because there's so much competition flooding the market now. It's just not a good idea to have a bad launch. Did the chat crash because I put up a link in my last message? It didn't show up. I didn't see it pop up. It might be some kind of auto moderator thing. I haven't actually gone in and done any real changes to the default YouTube moderation system. I've just left it as it is because the chat's relatively tame as it is. We might get like one bad actor every now and again that I just ban and whatever. It's not a big deal. So it might be some built-in YouTube automation thing to block links to specific domains or something. I don't know. Like how every ship girl gaming said Fragile Lane and Contai are dead. Look, man, like I said, it's a rough market. If you don't launch well, you're gonna have a bad time. Yeah. So when it comes to Eternal, I really do want it to have a solid launch. Okay. I'm gonna be on the straight and narrow here with you guys because it's Gundam stuff. You gotta be harsh because it's gotta be good, right? But I will be very disappointed if Eternal launches and they don't have some kind of not an SSR pick, because that's not the system they use, but the same mental concept of it. So having picked up a couple of games over the last handful of years that I've actually stuck with and played, I've seen a lot of really good launch ideas and some really bad ones, let's be real. But out of all of them, if you guys watched the video I did talking about Tales of Crestoria, to me, that was an amazing launch support system they had for new players. The game itself needed a little more time of development. There were a lot of bugs, a lot of crashing, all sorts of stuff. But the foundation for what made the game good gacha-wise were just chef's kiss. That was really good. You launch the game, here's your character pick, just pick one of these, SSR or SR characters and just start the game with whoever you want to, and then you get to the reroll section afterwards. Now, granted, you could make it better, switch it around, have a reroll system, and then a character pick ticket. But at the end of the day, to me as a player, I like having that option to just pick someone and start. Because if we go back to, and I know I'm getting on a big tangent here, for anyone that's just here for GBM, I'm sorry, but this is how it always goes. Back when Dragalia Lost originally launched, I really wanted to play that. I wanted to enjoy that game because it was Nintendo and Cygames. I play a lot of Grand Blue Fantasy. You can't see it, but right now I'm autoing content in the background on my computer. I'm farming up for the new Evoker uncaps coming up. So Cygames and Nintendo made a really cool little RPG, and I was like, I'm in for this. I want to play this. So I sat there and I was like, all right, how do I want to start this? Well, I want an SSR character and an SSR dragon. Those are my requirements for my rerolls. Just those two things. I multi-boxed. I had 6 emulators going at once, and I rerolled for well over 10 hours. Just sat there constantly going at it. And not once did I ever get that combination of character and dragon. And I dropped it. I never picked it up again. I never really played it. And I think it's a very important distinction to point out that I would have stayed as a player and probably put in a handful of money, if not a good amount of it, because the game itself wasn't actually that bad. It was very good art, good music. It looked fun to play. But they lost out a lot because they didn't let me just start with what I wanted to. You can make the argument, hey, well, it'll impact our launch gacha income. Sure, but think about it in the long term, okay? You may get a handful of players that'll pay a little bit of extra money to roll the gacha after they do their tutorial stuff to just get who they want and play. But then you're going to scare off like 10,000 players. Or you keep those 10,000 players, you lose a handful of purchases from this whale, and all of these people could potentially put $1 or $2 into your game, making you way more money than you would have made off of this, you know, the one person here. And that's kind of the issue that I have with a lot of these games, not especially in today's market, right? A good example, a lot of my friends in a social circle play Nikke. They've been playing it since launch. I was like, you know what? I'll play it just to have that common social point to discuss this game with them, because I play like 5 or 6 mobile games. I've trimmed a whole bunch of them out. Right now, it's just the older ones, Fate Grand Order, Grand Blue Fantasy, that I really mainly play. So I picked up another game just to have something to chat with. And it's also an idle game, so it doesn't really require a lot of input from me, just like 3 minutes of work a day. I like that. The reroll system's atrocious. Takes 10 to 15 minutes to do a single reroll on an account because they force you through a very slow plotting tutorial every time. You get one single 10 roll, and then you pretty much have to reload your account. You'll log out, reset it, resalt, all that fun stuff. Why do they not just have a pick ticket at this point? Right? For new players that want to pick up the game and play it, there is like a tier list that actually kind of matters for progression. And if you don't get the characters on it, you're just going to have a very rough time doing a lot of the content. Why do they not have a system in place to help new players that doesn't cost a bunch of money for a very small pool of characters? And that's kind of what I mean. When Eternal launches, I really want them to have some kind of really healthy new player support system so that we can just start with the mobile suit that we want from whatever limited pool they have at launch. Within reason, obviously. I know the development tree is there and they have very high-end, powerful mobile suits locked way in the back, but have like a lot of the iconic stuff available, you know? And just, at the end of the day, it's not going to make a huge impact because we all know they're going to add a bunch of mobile suits over time, right? I'm not going to say they're recycling assets because I don't know if they are or not, but you can definitely lift a lot of the art from the SD games and just put it in Eternal. And then you just create, you know, well, I don't even know if you have to create the 3D animations with special moves. You can just import those from SD Gundam as well. Anyways, there's a ton of content to be made in there. Will it really hurt them to allow players to skip that entire potential reroll phase and just go, hey, I want to start with this, I want to start with that? Game's like, sure. Then go, have fun. You don't have to waste a bunch of server resources constantly making new accounts and trying to do stuff. Don't have to waste a bunch of time. You just play the game. I think that's very important. I like Tails couldn't get into it because the way they made it just wasn't my style. Yeah, so that's... Tales of Crestoria was a very interesting experiment. Honestly, I did enjoy the turn-based combat a lot, and it was paired with the Tales IP, two things I very, very much enjoy. But I did find some issues at launch with just general stability of the game, lots of bugs, just a bunch of things. I did try to stay with it as long as I could, and I stopped just after that last banner I did a video for, which was the I can't remember the exact name of the banner, but it was Velvet in the kind of like a Showtime outfit, I guess is the best way to put it. But after that, I just kind of stopped playing the game because, yeah, thing was data mined. Community felt very fragmented. Yeah, shame that it EOS so quickly, but kind of to be expected. DL got a lot better down the line for that, but who didn't like the initial launch. Yeah, and that's what I mean, right? Launch is very important, and if you flub the launch, it's just hard to get people back in. I never went back to Dragalia Lost. I wanted to. I really wanted to play it and enjoy it, but with that constant reminder of how much time I wasted and how much effort I put in to try to get something that shouldn't have been that difficult, right? So I really hope more mobile games take that approach in the future. because my least favorite activity is rerolling. If they have like an infinite reroll system baked in where you can just sit there and keep mashing reroll until the character you want shows up, sure. Honestly, I think it's just better to give us a ticket, show us the entire list of characters we can pick from, and just let us do that. That way you're more informed than just through like a gacha roll where it's just, you know, your eyeballs see them go, oh yeah, I like that character, and then later on you regret it, right? A lot of people care about the meta for some reason at launch. Whatever. Anyways, let's get back to this. We're not even past the welfare yet. Oh no. Given that we can craft any suit we want, is rerolling that big a deal for Eternal? So when I pick up Eternal and I want to play it, as you guys probably know, I very much like Gundam Seed Destiny. I would love to be able to start the game with a high-end mobile suit from one of those series. I don't know if that's going to be accomplishable in a reroll. I don't know how long it'll take for me to actually be able to develop up to one of those mobile suits. But it would be nice to be able to have the option to pick them at launch so I can start leveling, playing, and having fun with a mobile suit that I care about and that I enjoy using, you know, whether it's aesthetic reasons, story reasons, whatever. Even though it might be developed, like something you can develop into, I don't want to have to farm and play the game and wait 2-3 months in order to do that. To me, that feels like a lot of time that I could spend doing almost anything else. And I think there are a lot of people that are less patient than I am as well, right? I don't mind farming in my games, right? That's why I play Grand Blue Fantasy. But it kind of just comes down to, if presented with the option to just pick the suit that I want and use it, or be given the option like, oh yeah, you can just, you know, wait, you know, like a month and a half, just farm and you can upgrade to that suit you want. It's like, all right, cool. I respect that. But I don't want to play the game for a month and a half with the mindset of I will eventually get what I want to actually start playing the game the way I want to. You know, you dig, you feel? All right. Anyways, torso looks good. Let's check out the arms. Check out the arms. There we go. Oh, I need to get another Arcarum run going. All right, so the Gundam Geminas arms. Trait with speed attribute, all power boosted by 25%. So obvious downside here is you need to be speed attribute, meaning it does lock you into the attribute triangle there, and obviously only usable on a speed suit. But the 25% all power boost on a welfare is really, really good. Unless I'm mistaken, the best we've seen for that on a welfare was 30%, wasn't it? And that was relatively recently. If not, you know, it doesn't. 25% all power boost is really, really good for a welfare. So no matter what, that's a really good activation thing there. I just don't like the speed attribute requirement very much, but it's workable. Gundam type pro tag. All right, so we did have Ace exclusive as the second tag up until here. Now we're switching over to pro tag. Kind of feeds into the, you know, it's more of a hybrid suit than anything. Now, statistically, what are we looking at here? So we do break 4K. We're sitting at like, what, 4,100 or so, kind of around there. For welfare arms, that's significantly high as far as melee attack goes. So that's really cool. Shot attack. Okay, so we're looking at what? That's like 5-ish change. So like 1,700, 1,750, kind of around there. Statistically, there's no real complaints on the arms for this suit. Shot attack, definitely very high for welfare arms. Melee attack, again, definitely high for welfare arms. There's really not too much to criticize here. The numbers are good. The trait, although I don't like the speed attribute requirement, is powerful, the all power boost. And Gundam type pro tag, very workable tags, powerful and flexible. Is it just me, or is this suit a paradox? Melee centered EX's shot focus stats. So I don't know if I would, at least up until this point, say it's shot focused. The head and the arms were definitely high up on shot, but that's because the head and the arms are typically, when it comes to the frame, the more important parts for shot. When it comes to melee, you're looking at typically what, like arms and like, yeah, sometimes head. But it's like what, arms and torso, maybe? End of the day, the two out of all the parts that I've looked at so far anyways, it looks shot centric only because the parts are more shot centric than the rest of the frame. Anyways, let's look at the legs. The traits: when attacking with beam, all enemies EX skill damage plus 25%. So this is a translation thing. When you're attacking with beam, so that's whether your attack is like a neutral beam saber attack, a beam shot EX skill, or beam melee, whatever, just the beam, all enemies will take 25% more EX skill damage. This is effectively EX skill damage boosted 25%, just worded in a very bad way. That's all this is. Very good though. Boosting your EX skill damage by 25% when using beam. Those are extremely common, available in all types of parts. Honestly, not bad at all. That's pretty good actually. Okay, Gundam type pro tag word tags again. All right, flexible, powerful, I like it. And statistically, we're looking at about 2050 or so, kind of around there. Oh, actually higher, more like almost 2100. And then shot attack, healthy amount of carryover, 1750, 1770, somewhere around there. Do keep in mind, the backpack and the legs tend to be the lowest defensively statted part of the main frame. Going over 1,000 is typically kind of what we expect these days post power creep, and kind of hovers around anywhere between 1,000 and like 1,1300 in there. Seeing this go well past that, awesome. The melee attack going way past 2k is really cool as well. That's nice. Gundam type pro tag word tags, good trait, good stats. All right. All right, and our excuse me, EX skill, Valiant Heart. B plus power, D pierce, low cooldown. So thrust a charge to cleave through enemies, lower hit physical resist by 29%. So based purely on the description, I really can't make a like a finalized decision on this or anything, because it really just comes down to the animation. Based on the wording, however, you thrust a charged sword to cleave through enemies. This sounds like something that's very whiffable, something that has a very set distance, duration, and everything. In that scenario, it could be worse, but it's still not really great. A lot of the problems with the non-bindable melee EX skills really boils down to just animation, really. Some of them are very easy to whiff, some of them are easy to disjoint out of, all sorts of stuff. Valiant Heart is that animation where you dash and then do a spin attack. The text really doesn't describe that very well, but I know the animation you're speaking of. That's where you do the little dash and you do the spin immediately after, yeah. In that case, like, it could be much worse. Like, it could be the rapid thrust. God, that's useless. But overall, it's on paper not inherently terrible purely because of the B plus power on it. But it's something that'll be replaced relatively quickly, especially considering it's on the backpack slot. Historically, the backpack has had unbelievably powerful EX skills, a lot of bindable EX cutscene skills as well. So this will be something that you use for a little bit, but it'll be quickly replaced because it's okay at best. And there's a lot better options available, especially in the melee category. I do like, though, that it's beam melee, so that it does kind of have that symbiosis with the trait to boost EX skill damage for beam stuff, so that's nice. Gundam type pro tag, all right, and statistically, okay, so pretty much 2k melee attack on this, and a lot of carryover for shot, like about 1700 or so shot attack on this. Overall, like statistically, the frame is very rounded. It's got a lot of melee. It's got a very healthy amount of shot on it. Definitely leaning a little more towards the melee side than the shot side, though. Kind of just what my memory's saying about the numbers here. So that's interesting. One of the better non-bindables, so it's basically a stopgap for lower level play. Yeah, for a new player, it'll be very, very useful. Once you kind of get to mid-ish game, you're just going to be abandoning it. But honestly, it's an event part. You can easily max it, so why not? All right, let's check out our beam sword. All right, when buffed, reduce cooldown by 50% once. Now, buffs are very easy to get. They are a dime a dozen. There will be zero issue activating this trait. 50% cooldown reduction. That's very, very powerful. I don't really have anything to complain about here. It's extremely easy to activate and is a 50% cooldown. Okay, as far as welfares go, that's actually a decent trait. All right, tags. Gundam type pro tag again, cool. And then parameters wise, we're looking at about... Okay. So, we have effectively 4,200 melee attack. That puts this weapon in the top 1%, if not like top 0.5% of welfare weapons, melee stat-wise purely. It then also has a good amount of shot damage as kind of a token amount added onto it, which isn't the most common when it comes to welfare melee weapons. So we're looking at about, what, 4 change or so in there. Not a lot, but it's better than 0, which is more typical for melee weapons from welfare stuff. So we get a very, very, very high base melee attack on this, a token amount of shot attack, a trait that's all about, you know, give yourself a buff, just start burning your EX skills out. Okay. I really don't have too much to criticize with this. Yeah. Accelerate rifle. That's an interesting looking weapon. All right. Part trait, cooldown time up 5%, initial EX skill charge boosted by 20%. So in case you weren't aware, cooldown and initial EX skill charge, or even though they technically affect the same thing, which is how quickly your cooldowns come off, effectively cooldown time, when you first start a match and your EX skills are all on cooldown, that's your initial EX skill. So typically a suit will have a lower time for the initial and then the base time for the EX skill afterwards. Initial EX skill charge affects that latter number. So let's say, for example, the Valiant Heart EX skill had a 6-second initial cooldown. This removes 20% of that at the beginning. May not sound like a big deal, but for example, larger bindable cutscene skills that have a 20-second initial cooldown or whatever, this actually does kind of start making a difference in there, especially when you stack it up, you know, to like 100% for instant cutscenes. Cooldown time up refers to after you've used the skill once, how quickly will it come back and be usable again. So hopefully that makes sense. Cool. All right, Gundam type Ace exclusive. Okay, nice tags. So we have a trait focused on like that first EX burst, tags for shot, and then as far as stat goes on here, after carryover, we're in that top 1% again. Absolutely zero melee on this, but with the shot attack and carryover, we're looking at like 42 change. Excellent. Great stats, great tags. The trait is more kind of burst centric, but it does require you to have an EX skill that, you know, does a lot of work. Solid trait for new players because ICD tends to be more of a detriment for newer players, and it's at 20% standard part values. Yeah, that's actually a really good point, Mana. Is as far as new player stuff goes, this is a very powerful trait. Once you get up to a certain point, though, you care a lot more about CDR than you do initial cooldowns. So, yeah, cool. And lastly, the shield. While Gundam type buff EX skill effectors, buff EX skill time up 15%. So this effectively means when you have the Gundam type word tag active on your suit, you get 15% extra duration on your buff EX skills. Now, my issue with this, I personally find this to be completely worthless, primarily because when you think about it, at least once you get to a certain phase of the game, probably like late early game, you should not have your battles lasting to the duration of an EX skill buff, because those typically run about a minute. If you're finding that your typical fights are lasting more than a minute once you get to a certain point, you probably want to, instead of looking to extend the duration of your buffs, you might want to take a step back and just kind of reassess clearing the content faster, because you really should never need to increase the buff time. The whole suit's a new player's wet dream. I don't know if I'd say the whole suit is, but statistically very good. Word tags, very flexible. You have your choice, man. You got your Ace exclusive, you got your Pro tag, you got Gundam type. Very powerful tag selection. You have some very convenient traits on the suit as well. And honestly, one of the best melee weapons for welfare I think we've seen. But I don't know if I'd say it's a wet dream for new players. It's definitely very, very powerful. But as far as welfares go, it's definitely amazing. When you consider how close we are to anniversary and potentially another power creep wave. Anyways, very good suit overall. If you're a new player, I highly recommend picking it up, maxing whatever parts you can. Good stuff. All right. Well, let's check out the gacha. I said gacha. Now wonders. Oh, the Blitz is still. Did the Blitz get alteration? I don't think it did it? This is just your standard suit, huh? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, I don't see the Blitz on here. Cool. So it was just a suit. Yeah, Blitz is standard. Cool. So, as the Jigen, whatever blast has a 7-star alteration, I'll just be looking at it in there. I will be looking at the pilot and the Blitz. But we're looking at the Blitz. I'm not going to be looking at the stats because it's a 7-star. Those are manually tuned. There's really no point. It's just a power creep suit. If you don't have a 7-star capable suit, get a 7-star capable suit. It'll blow your stuff out of the water statistically. That's pretty much the grand point of 7 stars. And if you do want to get a 7-star, get one from a limited or Sokai Fest, because those are just so much better than the standard 7 stars. 7-star is just effectively a complete barrier above everything else, and then it's between standard and limited. All it really is. Wait until he sees how they did the Scramble Gundam's chest rampage. Oh no. Alright, so let's take a look at Prayer Reverie here. Well, that's an interesting character to show up out of nowhere. More Stray content coming soon. All right. Prayer Reverie. Let's take a look at that trait. While force space, squad funnel time plus 60%. Okay. Is it already time for the funnel talk? Because I guess it's time for the funnel talk. Apologies in advance, I guess. What it boils down to in GBM is increasing the squad funnel time will never fix beam funnels. If you're using, shot funnels specifically. If you're using melee funnels, this doesn't apply at all. Feel free to use them. They're very powerful. They can clip through terrain. They're just extremely powerful is what they are. But shot funnels, however, suffer from a very big issue where they shoot on fixed intervals and the damage output is purely determined by how many bits you actually use. Melee doesn't suffer from this because of the melee modifier. Long and short, though, if you're using, let's say, the new Verka, it shoots out, it's what, 6 bits or whatever. Every X amount of seconds, they'll all do a round of firing, and then they'll do another round of firing after. But if you were to do something like, let's say, the Kshatriya that shoots out like 14 to 16 bits or whatever, every same tick, it'll shoot all of those bits at the enemy and they all will do damage, but it doesn't scale. So instead of having X damage divided by 14, 16, whatever, it's just they all do X damage. The problem with that is the less funnels you have, the less damage output you do overall. Increasing the funnel time, while it may make your funnels do more damage and catch them up to something like Kshatriya, it doesn't fix the underlying issue of why would you want to have an EX skill running for like 45 seconds to do damage, where you could have an EX skill that works in like half the time doing the same damage output, if not more. And that's pretty much what this is, right? It's, oh, hey, you know, increase the duration of your skill by 60% and you'll almost match the damage output of the Kshatriya. It's like, yeah, but it doesn't fix the problem. You're just you're increasing the issues here by, instead of fixing it, you're just extending the duration, making the cooldown technically longer, all these other things. Please fix beam funnels, please. Yeah. However, it should also be noted, because this can be put on a support suit, because, you know, while force space, you squad funnel time up, you could very easily put this onto one of your 2 support suits that you bring into battle with you, and all of your funnels get the uptime. So if you are using melee funnels, you can definitely benefit. Like if you're using the Moon Gundam backpack and one of your support suits has this with the force space tag, that's a lot of damage output added on for effectively free, because you're not using this in a primary suit slot. Yeah, so really what this boils down to is I would not ever run this on one of my main damage like combat suits, but as far as like a support secondary suit that I bring in to do stuff, heck man, if I'm using melee funnels, man, like a dirty shirt. I wouldn't use this at all for shot funnels though. Okay, simultaneously, I should point out, the game at this phase, our numbers are so inflated, it doesn't actually matter. You can do whatever you want with pretty much whatever suit you want and clear almost everything in the game outside of PvP and a couple of extremely high difficulty challenge missions and stuff, like in this very, very hard categories of like free missions and stuff. Really, like anything else goes though. You could totally use shot funnels and clear pretty much the entire story, if not all the story, without any issues at all. So really, this is purely for like, if you're looking at absolute end game way down the line from where you are starting off as a new player, you're not going to be using shot funnels out there. So investing in something like this early, if you plan on doing something way down the line, probably not the best use of your materials early. You're better off investing in something else. But feel free to do it, because it honestly doesn't matter unless you're looking to race top 1 PvP, multi-missions, whatever. Outside of that, it doesn't matter. All right, Ace exclusive force space tags. Ace exclusive, very good considering he is a mid shooter job license as well, so that'll kind of feed all into itself. Cool beans. Force space, I'm not the biggest fan of the foreign line of tags. I find that they're just not that great. They could be a lot better than they currently are, and we're not able to pick the maps that we actually play on, kind of double dipping into why this isn't, in my opinion, the best tag. However, it should be noted that especially in the last year, force space has seen a few really nice traits pop up that it activates, sort of including the one on Prayer here. And honestly, from like a min-max perspective, the 4 line of tags is worse in terms of like absolute min-max for your primary stats, but overall a 3% boost to all of your stats is really, really good versus 5% to your primary and your primary's defensive tag, because it's a difference of like 1.3% or something. Negligible, frankly. Obviously it scales, right? If you have 200,000 of your primary stat, that's 2,000 extra points, but at that point you don't need those numbers. That's crazy talk. Anyway, I don't like the 4 line of tags. Mileage may vary. Play the game however the heck you want. Don't let me tell you how to do it. Overall, Prayer is very interesting. Statistically, he definitely sits in the higher bracket for shot, because he's sitting at what, like just over 3k, like 3,200 shot. While that's not the highest that we've seen outside of build project pilots, sits in a very, very high bracket for them, paired with the job license matching as well. That boosts it further with the carryover. Token melee, obviously, because more shot pilot than anything. But the trait does leave a little to be desired, as it's only really good for melee funnels, because melee funnels are only good funnels. And the word tags, while it does have ace exclusive, a 4 space I think could be better utilized, like maybe a high firepower or something. But in terms of lore, it makes sense. Overall, okay. As far as like 4-star gacha pilots go, pretty good. Now, if we take him and go back, like when Lock-On Stratos was originally added to the game for shot, and we were absolutely blown away because he had like 2,700 shot attack or whatever, and we're like, oh man, so crazy good. And, you know, prayer just kicks down the door. It's like, oh yeah, that's me before carryover. Unfortunately, numbers of old. All right, let's take a look at the Blitz. Only 5 parts on this, so it'll be relatively quick. Like I said, I'm not going to be looking at the stats on this part, just going to be looking at the EX skill and the tags. Yeah, 7 stars, just kind of silly. Effect Canceller Gamma erases debuff effects on all Gunplas. So that's very interesting. So this could be a very interesting way to neutralize certain effects on your Gunpla. However, obviously erases it on the opponents as well. While it does have its potential uses, I struggle to really see a place where this really shines, only because the current meta is mostly about buffing yourself more than debuffing the other guy. So if this was erases all buff effects on all Gunplas, I could see this being downright nasty, because you could do some really, really cool stuff with that. But all debuff effects, while very interesting, it's just a map-wide clear. It's difficult to find a use for it. It's interesting for sure, but high mobility, close combat, very, very lore accurate tags, that's for sure. High mobility, powerful tertiary tag, activates an absolute ton of traits. You really can't go wrong with it on your suit, unless of course, you know, none of your traits are requiring high mobility, and it doesn't in your suits like a shot instead of a melee centric, just because the primary stat boost on this is melee, not shot. So you probably want to run this more on a melee than a shot machine, but you do you. Second tag being close combat. This is like a de facto tag for melee. You can almost guarantee that when you find a melee suit, it's going to have close combat on it, just because it's just ubiquitous across almost all the parts for melee. It activates, I don't even know how many traits for melee as well. And obviously it boosts the right stats for melee. It's a very, very, very common third tag for suits to run outside of mobile fighter and pro tag, because those boost your stats by 10%. Close combat's just very common. Cool. Very good tags, actually, all things considered. All right, Torso, Mirage Colloid. Now this, in lore, this is an unbelievably powerful skill, because it allows you to engage and disengage relatively freely, as it completely cloaks the mobile suit from effectively all scanners. And it's used in Seed, it's used in Destiny. It's just something no one really has a good answer for. You have to know Mirage Colloid is active to even think about, you know, using your scanners to find where a mobile suit or installation using it would be. Effectively very powerful. In this game, it's not able to be translated as well over, just because you're always locked on to a target, and or at least by default, and it doesn't allow you to fully disengage from lock-on systems. Because of that, this has a very limited overall viability for like usage. In text here, you can go stealthy, raise your melee attack, raise your shot attack, you become harder to target. Unfortunately, this isn't really quantifiable. It's more just like the enemy is less likely to target you automatically. But at the end of the day, like that doesn't really matter at all. If you're the only enemy you're going to be locked onto, if the enemy fires like an AoE, it's just going to hit you. It's just not good. unfortunately. It really is not translated very well. It's banned by treaty and lore. Yeah, yeah. Did you bring up the animation for this suit? Yeah, you know what? You're right. You're right. I even have it up here. Let me see here. There. Yeah, there's the Blitz. Now this might work right away, and I really hope it does, but I'll probably have to resize the window because it's on a different monitor now. Let's find out, shall we? Let's find out together. Did my settings carry? Oh, they did. Bless. Okay. So let's check out the Blitz animations here. So that's the clear, I'd reckon. Mirage Colloid. Yeah. Okay, so we have a counter skill. Alright, I'm just going to leave that playing while I talk about the Blitz. So, like, I feel like adding debuffs to the enemy would add a bit of value to the part. When it comes to the Blitz, like the head just clearing all debuffs, if it cleared all debuffs and then like applied a base defense down debuff or something, that'd be kind of cool. Yeah. Anyway, Mirage Colloid in GBM is just not that great. It doesn't really do anything, so you're really looking at it more for the stat buffs. With that in mind, a 29% melee attack boost and a 19% shot attack boost. The fact it splits up the two stats there, kind of, like 29% and 19% are okay values if this were a welfare suit. But considering this is a gacha 7-star suit, I would have expected like 39%, 29%. So interesting decision on there. It's just not that great of an awakening in terms of like actual gameplay. It looks nice. It's unbelievably lore accurate in what it's doing to the suit, making it invisible and making it more effective for a sneak attack. But in game, it's just not translated well. Actually, when I saw this suit, the first thing that I thought was this would be so powerful in evolution if they added this, because stealth functionality in evolution, it would be just so unbelievably powerful for like point offense and just like breaking enemy lines. That just sounds like such a good addition for that. For this game though, Mirage Colloid, its big keystone thing is just not great. Given that each event means you can get 4x 4-star part in exchange after a month, started to think gacha suit these days. That, yeah, you know, you're right. You're definitely right on that. But it's just like, they could have really done something with Mirage Colloid in this game. They could have actually made it so you cannot be targeted for a set amount of time while it's active. But doing anything inside of Mirage Colloid would break it. So that you attack, you immediately terminate your Mirage Colloid bonus, you get your attack buff on your next hit. So what you would do, because remember in lore, whenever you attacked using in Mirage Colloid, you would have to break Mirage Colloid to do it. It was one of the balancings of it. But if they were like, you enter Mirage Colloid state. For 10 seconds, you cannot be targeted. Your attack is boosted by 300%. You know, your attack, melee and shot attack boosted by 300%. Your first attack breaks Mirage Colloid. It's literally an assassin buff. Where you use it, the enemy just cannot lock onto you. They rely on pure AoEs, or they just stall out the timer until it wears off. And if you hit them during that period, you just get a big fat buff on your next hit, whether that's an EX skill, a normal attack, whatever. You're trading a slot for a self-assassin buff. I think that would have fit the Blitz way more than what Mirage Colloid currently does, you know? I'm also really just... They never really leveraged the weapons the Blitz has. Right, like if you, this cutscene was the first time they really used its entire kit, but they never used the claw. Really, they never used the torpedo needles. They never leveraged these things, I think, properly with the first iteration. The second iteration here, they have the counter that does, but I think those could have been separated because remember, the needles were like disabling tools, so you could totally have just added like a paralysis effect onto them. Fire the 3 of them, they hit the enemy, they're stunned for like 3-4 seconds or whatever. You have the claw, you fire it out, you hit them, and it does a quick little cutscene skill where you like pull them in, hit them with your beam sword or something, you know, just straightforward. But they just all put it in here, which looks cool. I'll give that. I do like that counter. That's very cool, lore accurate blitz. Anyways, by the way, the values on identical to the welfare version. Honestly, really like nothing of value lost there though, right? I'm just so sad about just in general the Mirage Colloid. All right, anyways, next part, let's take a look at the arms. Mirage Step. So this is our counter skill. So you use it, it's this skill here. You use it, you get that little icon on your bar. The enemy hits you with an EX skill. On impact, instead of becoming bound and trapped in the enemy's skill, you counter with this. So what it does, it recovers 48% of your health, which is really good. That's a huge heal. Melee attack up 29%, very medium boost considering. And raise your Vernier capacity by 25%. Like I said, I just don't find that to be a very useful thing to get, so mileage may vary, of course. A Pierce, B Power, and standard cooldowns, this kind of thing. The B Power does kind of limit its overall viability. Honestly, I'm really shocked to see that a gacha suit doesn't have at least B+ on something like this, if not A- or even A. The A Pierce, though, is very nice. That will help it ignore a lot of the defense and resistances. But overall, this is just so... I'm not going to say they did the Blitz dirty, because the fact that it's getting any recognition at all is really, really cool, and I like that a lot. But, like, it just doesn't feel like it was really leveraged on in terms of, like, what its strengths are, you know? Treat it as a true awakening with a counter built in. Effectively, yeah. Disappointed. It's not bad, but it's definitely nothing I would ever spend a single Haro chip on. And at the end of the day, yeah, this is the only really cool part about it, I would say, out of all of it. It's just that counter scene. Is what it is. Is what it is. All right. Legs. When armor is 50% or less, squad cooldown minus 25%. So the 25% squad cooldown is really nice, but the activation requirement of needing 50% or less armor is really just not cool. That means you have to take, or a support suit with this equipped has to take a significant amount of damage before you get this buff, which means it's not going to be active off the rip at the beginning of a match. You are relying on whatever's controlling that suit, you or AI, to just take a bunch of damage but not die. If you can pull it off, 25% is nothing to sneeze at, but the 50% or less requirement heavily kneecaps it, in my opinion. Like, it's a heavy kneecap. And the backpack. When armor is 90% or more, all enemy cooldown time up 23%. Now this is powerful. I like this a lot. 90% or more armor, very easy, just don't get hit. The all enemy cooldown time up 23% is very powerful, because people that have like min-maxed out that 100% CDR build, or maybe just a little more because they may have a one of their parts has a cooldown time up 5 or 10% thing. This throws a wrench in that by adding 23% to their cooldowns, so that could change a game significantly. That could actually be the difference between you being able to activate an EX skill and finishing off the other guy before they can do it. So honestly, I think this is kind of the part for the suit, even though it's not like jaw-droppingly amazing or anything. All things considered with this suit, okay. So very, very interesting. I feel like the Blitz could have been so much better, honestly. I really hope that when they get around to putting in like the Calamity, the Forbidden, Um, I want them to really do justice for those suits, because they were powerful when they were like in lore. It just feels like you look at the Blitz and it's kind of like its big ticket ability is just so useless. Well, is what it is. All right, let's go take a look at our alterations after we look at the Twitter video for the other suit, which I think should have been uploaded by now. Yes, no? Is this it? Yes. All right, let's take a look at our new gacha suit, shall we? All right. All right. Okay. I like the gumption this suit has. Okay. As far as the aesthetics go, I am a huge fan of this suit. I've always said, and I will always say, I am a huge fan of giant beams, general beam weapons in Gundam. I just love the way they look and feel. This suit really cranks that up to the max, and it's just like, we'll go from the top down here. We'll start with the entree of a really cool forehead face laser beam going off. That's pretty dope. And we got the main course over here of a torso beam, and it's got that really cool red core kind of thing going on. And then they give you the final dessert touch here for effectively a 50% rolling buster, just sweep. And you know, you top it all off with that. I love it so much. I love it. Aesthetically, I love the way those EX skills look. I'm not a fan of how the suit looks itself, but the EX skills I absolutely do like. All right, so we'll take a look at Blast here real quick. Jigen Blast Master. And we'll work our way down here. Now, as it goes with alterations, I'm not going to look at the stats. I'm just going to look at the EX skill / part trait, as those always get an upgrade when it comes to alteration. I just don't think there's a point to look at the stats for these suits, as, again, much like the Blitz, it is a 7-star suit. It is safe to assume it is power crept and just better than the other 7-star suits available in the pool. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because if you're not running a 7-star suit, it is going to be inferior statistically. There's really no question about it. So I just don't see a point in looking at the stats. I would also highly recommend to anyone that's going to be investing in alternating a part, make sure the stats before and after, especially the after part, match up to what you want. There are less than 5 examples in the game where the stats drastically differed before and after alterations, to the point of it being like an actual what happened to the stats moment. With that in mind, always make sure that what you're getting is what you're looking for statistically, because it's a lot of investment for a lot of players to do this, and you can't roll it back once you do. So just keep that in mind. Is it time to roll? No. It's not a Kshatriya, it's not the Amaterasu, and it's not an absolutely jaw-droppingly amazing Seed or a Stray suit, so it's kind of a pass, really, for me. Aesthetically, I like this a lot. I have a feeling it'll become... These EX skills, as cool as they are, will probably be outclassed by whatever comes in the anniversary, because that's just kind of the way it goes. I'm really hoping, honestly. But, end of the day, no rolls for now. I'm just going to review the suit. Well, not really review. Give impressions of the suit. And do the rest of the alterations and then bail. Because, time is it? Yeah, it's already getting late. I spent a lot of time at the beginning of the video talking about not GBM. Alright. So, let's take a look at our High Mega Cannon. That's our head EX skill. So, let's go take a look at that. That's, this sucker here. Simple, straightforward, point and shoot. Oh, is it a multi-hit? Yes, alright, multi-hit. B plus power, D pierce. That is effectively the bog standard distribution when it comes to an EX skill with actually, I was going to say low cooldown. This has a medium cooldown. That's a very interesting distinction to make. It lowers the hit enemy's shot attack and defense by 29%, 39% respectively. Now, normally, when I see this, I'm not impressed. The reason for that, all right, the big reason, is because typically it doesn't have any real symbiosis with the rest of the kit, or it just doesn't really, reduce the right stuff. But when you consider all the EX parts on this suit are all beam shot in some fashion, this skill is effectively the softener. You hit them with a B+ power D pierce skill. In doing that, you reduce their shot defense by effectively 40%. And then you follow up with the rest of the lasers in the kit. It's one of those rare cases where I look at its B+ power, its longer than short cooldown, and what it does, and it's honestly, I'm really okay with this. This is one of the very few edge cases where I think instead of a self buff, these debuffs are actually really, really good. Very rare case of that. High firepower ace exclusive tags as well. Spicy. All right, the Calidus multi-phase beam cannon, A+ pierce, B power. That's a very interesting cooldown cycle it has. Instead of 15 seconds initial, it's 6 seconds. And that further reduces their beam resist by 69% and their melee attack by 29%. So this is very interesting. So I wonder, is the torso also multi-hit? It is. So to keep in mind, both the head and the torso have a reduction of the enemy's shot defense and beam resist, and they hit multiple times. So if you open with the head and you blast them, you're reducing their shot defense and you're hitting them. So the first hit will apply that debuff, and every following hit will work off of that debuff and do increased damage. Then you follow up with, let's say this. You're hitting them with a multi-shot or multi-hit chest shot that reduces their beam resist by a very significant amount, over 2/3, and it hits them multiple times, doing extra damage with each hit because you heavily reduce beam resist. Again, a lot like the headpiece, I'm actually really okay with the debuffs on this. The melee attack down, you know what? 30% is 30%. That is significant. Same with the shot attack on the previous part. I'm just finding it very interesting how it seems to be softening them up for the big one. Very cool. High firepower ace exclusive again. All right. Arms, the anti-beam ship cannon. I believe that was the sweeper. Yes, so that's this skill here where you just whoo, spicy tamales. A+ power, D pierce, no debuffs or anything. This is just a very straightforward, in the most sweeping of ways, right to left strafe, and you just fire big beam, big damage. Amazing for clearing mooks, amazing for just doing damage. I have nothing to complain about here. A+ powers are really hard to say no to. Absolutely bonkers. High firepower, ace exclusive again. All right, and the legs. Let's take a look at the crowning piece, I guess. Full blast mode. Oh, that's nasty. So that fires literally the entire thing. So what do we got? A+ power. That right off the bat. Great. The cooldown is a cooldown for a cutscene though, something to keep in mind. So this is treated with the same output as a cutscene EX skill would have, but obviously you're not cutscened. Raise your shot attack by 64%. Okay, I need to rewind just a second here. Are you getting that buff before you go burr? No, you're not. Okay. If you got that 64% buff before doing any of that, I would have immediately said this is like an amazing, amazing part. But because you get the buff after, it's still good. Don't get me wrong. 64% shot attack buff, I believe, is the highest modifier that we've had for shot attack stuff. Maybe, yeah, no, it's just the force. Anyways, your shot skill cooldowns also go down by 23%. Overall, if that buff applied before the attack, this would be very, very, very powerful. But it doesn't. So it's still good. Not as good as it could have been. Mana also points out a very neat little thing here. For a limited 7-star, you know, like a Festival Sokai suit, none of its abilities go above A+. We don't see an S, we don't see a double S, nothing. Which is a little strange. Overall, though, I think this suit has a very interesting kit in that everything kind of feeds back into itself here. We have the first 2 skills are designed to soften up the enemy's stats. You have the shot defense down, you have the beam resist down, and then you have the full blast mode or the sweep, whether it's you're fighting a whole bunch of mooks at once or you're fighting a single boss or something you just need to burst down. You have ways to soften it up and then absolutely just demolish it. Now, although this does have A+ power and D pierce, if you keep in mind that the first 2 skills exist and you reduce the enemy's shot defense and beam resist by a significant percentage, that pierce, if we were to just spitball a number out of our heads here and think about it, probably sits in the anywhere between the A to S- range in terms of resistance reductions, right? That's crazy. So at the end of the day, on its own, this is pretty good, only because it gives you that fat shot attack buff after, and it gives you that cooldown reduction, and honestly, I think it just looks really cool and does a lot of damage. But if you look at the suit as a whole, I think it's a lot better than like the sum of its parts kind of thing, you know? Very interesting suit. I like it. I don't know if I would recommend rolling on it just because it doesn't have any like big singular big ticket kind of thing going on with its core parts anyway. But all right, and let's check our last 2 parts. The backpack. When buffed, squad buff EX skill effect up 40%. Okay. So what this means is when you have this part on and you have a buff, everyone in your squad just gets a flat 40% applied to any buffs they get. So you could totally slap this onto a support thing and use that full blast. All of a sudden, your shot attack is going up 104%. And while heavy armor, all enemies, all damage plus 45%. So that's another huge one. I think the highest all damage boost we've seen was 50%. That was on another limited suit. This is 45%, and you just need to have heavy armor active. Considering heavy armor is a tertiary tag, so it's not either of the primary tags you'd run on a shot suit. It's not ace exclusive, and it's not commander, if I remember right. Could be commander, yeah. With that in mind, you have that 3rd slot. Heavy armor can go in there. Boost your shot attack. You get a 45% all damage boost on top of that's really good, especially when you pair it with that first 1 buff thing where everyone gets 40% extra buffs. Anything that you do, just plus 40% on. Honestly, I'm a real fan of the 2 traits here on this. That has the potential to really do some work. And the beam gun. While heavy armor, all enemies, all damage, plus 45%. And while heavy armor, EX skill cooldown reduced by 28%. I literally just have no complaints about the traits on this. As long as you're running heavy armor, this gun is ridiculously fun. You get that huge all damage steroid. You get I think that's the highest EX skill cooldown modifier available, 28%. Yeah, bonkers. Overall, the blast looks like it'll be a blast to play, but tis. All of its EX skills look really cool, has very high kind of like symbiosis between all of its abilities. The backpack and the gun feed really well into what the primary suit does. All in all, like this is, as a whole picture, pretty damn good. I wouldn't say it's obviously the best suit or the best combination of parts available in the game, but like it's really good for what it is. But you do kind of need most, if not the entire collection for it to really shine, you know? I'm going to assume all the EX parts there are beam categories that can be buffed by mid-long shooter LB. Yeah, they are. All of them are beam. You can tell just by the image. I got the beam rifle, might build a heavy armor build sometime in the future. Yeah, no, absolutely, Tin. That's actually a really good thing to look into if you got the beam rifle. Okay, so mana. It's not actually going to be that big of a suffering thing for me. For you see, I have a can of relax juice. And then when this can is done, I planned ahead. I got a second can of it. All right. So let's take a look at our permanent additions. We have 6 new suits to look at the alterations for. Much like I did with the previous batch of alterations, I'm really only going to look at the part trait / EX skill and kind of how it's improved. But do keep in mind, these parts typically are going to be very old. The chance of me remembering what they were before the alteration is extremely slim. So I'm just going to be looking at the alteration, seeing what's there, and just kind of putting that in context of these suits not being current, not being, you know, super limited or anything. Okay, let's take a look at good old Scrambly Doo. Scrambled egg sounds really good. I'm gonna do that tomorrow for breakfast. All right. So, Scrambled Gundam Noggin. While Transformer, enemy shooting power reduced by 30%. So 30% is a healthy debuff. Transformer is pretty easy to get your hands on, available on a ton of parts. I don't know if I would run this on a primary suit. You got to keep in mind these types of debuffs, you know, enemy shooting power reduced, only work for the suit this is equipped onto, not for your entire party. So you are taking up a potential offensive boosting trait with a defensive trait instead. So that's just something to keep in mind. You can't put this on a sub and have it affect your main suit. With speed attribute, buff EX skill effect up 30%. So a lot like my original kind of hold up when we were looking at the welfare. I'm not a big fan that it locks you into a specific attribute, but it's there. If you're running a speed suit already, this could be a nice addition with the buff EX skill effect up 30%. That's an extremely high modifier. But however, the first trait does kind of gimp this a little bit. I'm not a big fan of the combination, but it is there. All right, Torso. Rampage. Use wild particles to summon blah, 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 blah. Raise shot attack of your squad by 24%. Okay. Raise shot defense of your squad by 24%. All shots go cooldown instantly down 33%. Yee doggy. B plus power D pierce. Honestly, that cooldown increase is pretty, or I guess decrease. The numbers went up and the numbers it affect goes down. I don't really have a ton of complaints about this. Yeah. Honestly, healthy upgrade. Oh wait, did that say squad? Am I so buzzed I missed the squad? Yep, raise shot attack and defense of your squad. So Rampage is pretty good. Obviously, the buff numbers aren't the highest, right? That's not like 29% or 39% or anything. But considering everything else this does, including the skill cooldown cut of 1/3, damn good. All right. Arms. Arms. Beam cannon. A- power, D pierce. Bombard beam rifle, so removable shield binder. Okay. Low cooldown, A- power. On paper, I don't really have any complaints about this. One thing to keep in mind, it is a hybrid part, meaning if you do put this on your actual frame and you don't use this as a cosmetic piece, you are taking up 2 slots instead of 1, meaning you are technically removing the ability to have 2 more part traits on your suit. If you like the appearance of this part or you like the EX skill, I would highly recommend using it on a custom skin on the front instead of having it as actually part of your frame, just to kind of min-max out those extra traits. Even the developer acknowledged how OP the scramble chest is, had they didn't bother changing the Pearson power. Yep. No, it's the Scramble Gundam. I don't know if it's a dev favorite, but like they definitely like it. All right, let's take a look at our legs. Saber Boomerang. A- power, D pierce, slash and hurl. We've seen this on a ton of suits in the past. My biggest gripe with this is you're splitting the damage into two parts. The first part is the initial swing. The second part is the throw. When it comes to a normal EX skill, you're combining it all into one package, so that when you throw the shield, 100% of the damage is being done. With this, you have the potential to whiff 50% of your damage and then hit with the rest of it. Simultaneously, if you decide to use it at the start of a match because you don't have access to another throwing skill, you're, again, losing 50% of the damage output. I'm not a big fan of that. I find that whenever you have that kind of split, it really devalues the overall usefulness, and this is definitely one of those cases. So, on paper, it doesn't look bad. In practice, I don't like the split. All right, and the backpack. While 4 computers, shooting power boosted by 30%. 4 computers, much like the other 4 tags, I'm not a fan of, like I said. 4 computers does activate a handful of good traits, a lot like 4 space. I'm not sure if it's really terribly useful here. Again, do what you want. It's not a humongous loss. It's less than 2% overall, but it is there. With that as well, when attacking with beam, enemy shooting damage plus 35%. Very easy to get beam stuff, so that's not really even a concern. The 35% enemy shooting damage is a really high modifier. The highest we've seen, I think, was 50%, or was it higher than that these days? Anyways, very high mod, typically what we'd expect from a limited or Sokai. Cool. I don't really have much to complain about here. You get a lot of shooting power, and this is in both categories too, because if you remember, some of you may, some of you may not, with the way the battle formula that we've best to our ability to determine works, you have X power boosted by whatever percent on one side, and then enemy whatever damage plus percent on the other side. So it does the one calculation, then does the other calculation, slaps them together, does other stuff with it. With that in mind, you get a higher overall damage output if you're splitting those styles of buff in between the two sides. If you put it all in one, you'll still do an absolutely huge amount of extra damage and it goes through. But if you split it up into like half and half, your overall output would be marginally higher, right? Not jaw-dropping, game-changingly higher. It's just one of those little min-max things. But with that in mind, there is a marked increase. This feeds both of those sides of the formula in itself, which is really cool. All right, overall Scramble Gundam, big boost, pretty cool. Rampage, still OP, big buffs, bigger buffs, I should say specifically. Nice. Overall, a pretty good improvement. All right, let's take a look at our F90. S-type, specifically. Head-mounted Vulcan, goodbye. I don't even have to look at that. They even the rebalance didn't fix it. All right, torso. When armor is 70% or less, Vernier consumption minus 0, or equals 0, sorry, for 16 seconds. So literally, whenever you go below 70%, for 16 seconds you get a buff, you don't use Vernier, so you can just infinitely boost. I'm not a big fan of this. I don't really think it, really does much, but mileage may vary, playstyles are different. I'm not a big fan. And while long range, that is referring to the word tag long range, not the distance from your enemy long range. Enemy shooting damage plus 70%. So this arguably is powerful enough to be 2 traits worth of output. On average, you would see a 35% boost to whatever twice. This just combines it into one. That's a very powerful second trait. The first trait is more or less just kind of garnish onto it. While I may not be the biggest fan of the first trait, that second trait, as long as you're using a long range word tag, very powerful. Arms. I said arms. Missile pod and beam cannon. Okay. Fire the missile pod, blah, blah, blah. You can move while firing. So this is your typical magazine EX skill. However, it is C power, meaning it's more or less useless when you consider it in the context of we have ticketable items that have a better power spread than this part does. If you're in it purely for the aesthetics, again, power to you. You don't need to worry about it. Our stats are inflated enough now that we don't have to worry. You can clear pretty much all the content in the game using suboptimal parts. It doesn't matter. But in terms of what's available, settling for C power, you can do better than that. Interesting magazine size, though, 15. Typically, it rounds off at 11. 15 is kind of a high number. Legs. Cruise missiles. D pierce, A minus power, low cooldown. All right, bog standard. I'm assuming this is going to be a dumb missile system. Yeah, you just launch missiles. They fly forward, hit the target, do damage. I nothing else to really explain here. If they're homing missiles, that makes them very good. Homing missiles are a powerful tool because typically when you use a missile EX skill, they can be dodged pretty easily. They don't have the fastest travel time. But if they are slightly homing, it'll increase the value a lot. But also at the end of the day, most times the AI are just going to stand there or walk into it anyways, so it doesn't really matter that much. Only 2 though. It doesn't matter if it only fires 2 missiles. The A minus power does a lot for that. Of course, the lettering, the power, I should say, doesn't purely reflect what it does, because we have had cases where B plus power skills hit significantly weaker than other B plus power skills. It's just rare enough that it's a safer assumption that it won't happen. All right, and the backpack, the Mega Beam Cannon. Yeah, you just fire the beam cannon. B plus power, B plus pierce, medium cooldowns. I don't really have a lot of complaints about this. It's a powerful EX skill, does damage. Yeah, that's really it. There's not literally anything else to say about it because it doesn't do anything else. Very interesting upgrades to the F90. I don't know if all of them are like jaw-droppingly amazing or not, but there's some interesting changes happening there. All right. And the Shinmusha. Now, somebody mentioned that the Shinmusha becomes very, very tanky post-alteration, so that's something to keep in mind. Now, is this the SD version? No, it's the full-bodied version. Cool. All right. So, starting from the top, let's work our way down. With speed attribute, shooting crit rate boosted by 30%. Crit in this game is a joke. Don't worry about it. It's worthless. Moving on. While heavy armor, enemy all power reduced by 70%. Damn, son. All right. So typically, my biggest gripe with reducing enemy stats is it's split up. You have your melee, you have your shooting, and you have your EX. So in a typical defensive reduction build, you would need to build a lot of shot defense, melee defense, EX defense. A while back, we started seeing all power reduction by whatever percent. This solidified those 3 requirements into just a single trait. Meaning, if you stack just a couple of parts with high enough modifiers, you cover all of the potential damage types that could come in, and you could, on paper, actually reduce the enemy damage to 0, no matter what they did to you. This part very heavily feeds into that with 70% reduction. That is huge. Now keep in mind, you may think, oh, all I need is a 30% and they do 0 damage. Not entirely true. Remember, just as you're able to get buffs that, boost your shooting damage by 30%, that feeds into this. So imagine your suit starts with 100% melee, 100% shot, 100% EX. And this kicks in. They're now down to 30, 30, 30. But the enemy suit has boost your shooting power by 50%, 50%, 50%. That's 180% total now, because it's 150% from the buffs plus the 30% left over after you take 70 from their base 100. So while this is an unbelievably powerful foundation to work with, it does require a good amount of investment to ensure that your enemy is doing very little, if any, damage to you. And again, this is just a very powerful foundation. Cool. First trait, completely worthless. Second trait, if you're doing some kind of super niche defensive turtle build that you just never want to die and you want to time out your enemies, this could be it. What's the value at level 1? Good question. 35%. That's still very healthy. Shot or melee affects EX. EX only affects EX, not regular melee shot attacks. Yeah. But there are still 3 different types of potential damage reduction involved when it comes to reducing the enemy stats. So even if you have, enemy EX skill damage at, 0%, but their melee damage is at like 250, they'll still be doing damage with their EX skills. And that's what I'm saying is you have to remember that just because you've reduced all power by 100% doesn't actually mean they're going to be doing 0 damage, because they can have buffs to increase specific values and you just have to compensate for that. Whether it's just stacking more and more and more all power reduction to be on the safe side, or specifically targeting different values, because we do have specific parts that reduce 90% of melee, 90% of shot. So you can very, very specifically target certain stuff. It's just something to keep in mind. 100% is not really 100%. All right, that's a really cool second trait added onto the head. All right, torso. While heavy armor, all power boosted by 30%. Considering heavy armor also activates that first really powerful defensive trait, I have no issues here. It fits thematically with the suit's motif, heavy armor, and the all power boost is very healthy. While buffed, enemy all damage plus 35%. So whenever you have a buff, they just 35% more damage on everything you do to them. Again, no complaints on this. All right, arms. When attacking with physical, melee power boosted by 30%. Okay. We have a lot of physical options in this game, whether it's physical weaponry from guns to swords, whether it's physical EX skills, whether it's beam or well, not beam, but a physical shot or physical melee. We have options. So that in mind, melee power boosted by 30%. Okay, not the highest modifier we've seen. That goes up to 50% or higher, but for what the suit is, it's good. And with long rifle category equipped, I'm going to turn this light a little bit. It's a little bright for my eyeballs. Perfect. With long rifle category equipped, job gauge increase boosted by 60%. I'm not the biggest fan of the job gauge. I don't think it was very well executed and could be just infinitely better than it currently is. Remember, don't let me tell you how to play the game. You play it however you want. If you like the job gauge, job licenses, and all that stuff, power to you. You do what you want and play the game as you want, because honestly, it's what matters at the end of the day. And again, this is from a kind of air quotes min-max perspective. It's more than good enough in the eyes of the game as it currently is. So I just think it's kind of an empty increase, so to speak. So while you have a long rifle category equipped, so that's like sniper rifles and stuff, you get the 60% job gauge increase boost. Could be very convenient for you. You're probably going to be running this on a melee suit, considering the first trait. So your long rifle is not really a big deal to you because you're not running shot, right? You're running melee. So the job gauge increase there, maybe it's worth it, maybe it's not. I wouldn't, maybe you would. Depends. It really boils down to, mileage may vary situation. All right, let's check out our legs here. Nichiren Maru. B+ power, A pierce, and you unleash a barrage of attacks with your blade. On paper, in terms of pierce power, very good, paired with a nice short cooldown. Text-wise, this feels like something that's going to be very easy to whiff, very easy to kind of disjoint out of, End of the day, I'd be very hesitant about saying, this is a good EX skill just based on the dialogue I'm seeing here. Boils down to the animation. They really need to add that inline animation viewer because I really do want to be able to see these in action as I'm kind of reading about them. But yeah, this really just boils down to what the animation is. But based on it being a multi-hit barrage of attacks, it sounds like it's a very short conal in front of you. I wouldn't risk it for the biscuit. All right. Backpack. Oh, okay. Shin Sanrai Nichiren Giri. That's a mouthful. S power, D pierce, bindable cutscene, EX skill, cutscene cooldown. Shocking. Throw your Naginata forcefully to bring enemies to heal in a single stroke. Raise melee attack of your squad by 49%. So from what I'm seeing here, physical melee, cutscene, that's a throw? This is most likely a charge. You hit them, you begin the cutscene, and then you just hit them with a single strike. The 49% melee attack boost is very healthy. My biggest issue is here, does that buff apply before or after the animation begins? Because that's kind of a big deal. If you get that melee buff before you start doing stuff, that's a ton of extra value. But if this only applies after the animation, it's still good, but that extra value is kind of important, I think. It ends with a lightning sword slash. Yeah, it's a charge. Okay, cool. Overall, S power, 49% melee attack boost on paper, looks really good. Yeah, I don't really have too much to complain about this. Yeah. If the effect is applied before the animation plays out, 10 out of 10. If it applies afterwards, still good, not as good. All right. Let's check out our... Yeah, right, this thing has a lot of weapons. Makes sense, considering the suit itself. All right, so the Nichiren Maru itself. Let's take a look. What do you do? Yes, okay. While close combat, EX skill power boosted by 30%. Close combat, as I mentioned before, it's super common. You'll have no issue finding this, especially if you're building a melee suit. 30% EX skill power boost, cool. With speed attribute, again, I don't like that it locks you into a specific attribute, but is what it is. EX skill cooldown reduced by 20%. I really like the symbiosis going on here. You got the EX skill power boost, the EX skill cooldown reduction. They feed into each other really well. No complaints. Really cool. Obviously, this isn't at the level of like a 7-star super limited or anything, but for what it is, it's pretty damn good. All right, let's check out the Sanko Maru. With speed attribute, enemy melee power reduced by 30%. Well, that's straightforward enough as it is. I've already talked about these things separately. With when physical damage taken, enemy all power reduced by 70%. I don't like that this only activates after you've taken damage. The 70% all power reduction is nice. The physical is a little restraining though. As obviously it only works for physical, won't work for beam, and because typically you're not really going to know what your enemy is going to throw at you before you start, you can't really plan ahead for this. With that in mind, it's okay. It could be a lot better if that restriction was gone, but 70%, much like on the head, nothing to sneeze at. Yeah, it's 140% all power reduction against physical, 70% against everything else. All right, the Denko Maru. Unleash a barrage of attacks, A- pierce, B+ power, short cooldown. This sounds like one that would have a very easy animation to whiff. It does, of course, boil down to the animation, but based on the dialogue, I don't really have high hopes for it, you know? All right, let's take a look at our Tanegashima. That's an interesting name for an interesting weapon. Right, that's one. With speed attribute, initial EX skill charge boosted by 20%. Okay. Still not a fan of speed attribute, locking stuff down, but it is what it is. Oh, okay. That's what that, I was like, what is that in the corner of the camera? And I realized a little bit of my monitor's on there. Okay, that'll work. Oh, wait, what's the frame rate of this camera at? Oh, okay. The frame rate died because I trimmed out all the lighting. It's too bright. Actually, wait, I wonder. Okay, that's easier on my eyes. More blue light. Anyways, with speed attribute, initial EX skill charge boosted by 20%. I don't like the speed attribute lock. The initial EX skill charge boost is a relatively high modifier though, so awesome, no super complaints there. When attacking with physical, enemy melee damage plus 35%. So again, as long as you're using physical, that means your neutral weapons, your sword, your gun, or EX skills, whatever, and there's a lot of those, the enemy melee damage taken is increased by 35%. Very healthy second trait. First trait, obviously very reliant on you being speed attribute, but also pretty good considering the initial EX skill charge boost. Overall, nice. And that's it for that suit. All right. Now, on to our next line here. Our old welfares, if I remember correctly. Blue Destiny Unit 2 BD. Exam System Limiter off. Raise your speed by 20%. Raise your melee attack by 39%. Very straightforward awakening. There's really nothing else to explain here. 39%, 20%. The 20% is kind of a bog standard. 39% is healthy for what the part is. Very, very straightforward. Torso. Waste wire guided missiles. You fire wire guided missiles. The game is nothing if not descriptive. B plus power, D pierce, low cooldown. Again, a lot like the leg missiles from the previous, well, not the previous suit, but the suit previous that. Honestly, really nothing to complain about. Straightforward, fire a couple missiles, call it a day. Arms. All right. The arms trade a Xeon buff effect up, and buff effect off on arms are rare to find. Yes. So you, to my understanding anyways, you are right on that. The buff EX skill effect up typically is something that I'm not... Like, this is interesting, right? Because as far as welfares go, finding a 45% buff EX skill effect up is pretty damn difficult, if not impossible. So this is very interesting. It's also very interesting to find something that requires Xeon. Keep in mind, as far as melee tertiary tags go, Xeon's actually very powerful. You get your 5% melee attack boost, as well as a 10% melee defense boost. When you remember carryover in effect, about 30%, give or take, that carries over your 10% defense. You get what, like 3.3% plus the 5% melee attack. You're looking at like, 8.3, 8.4 in that range, right? Percentage increase to your melee attack. That's almost wholesale another primary effective tag. However, Xeon also doesn't activate a lot of traits, so it is a trade-off in that sense. You get a very powerful tertiary tag, one that's very, very high in the modifiers, but it also doesn't really do a lot for you outside of that. Very rare cases like this where you get a cool double trait stack. 45% buff EX skill effect up, really cool. Xeon requirement, very restrictive because it's not the most common tag on higher end parts, but it is there. I think it's fine on a support buff build. Yeah, it absolutely is. If you put these arms on a support suit that just has nothing but buffs down the line, and it has the Xeon word tag active, that's a 45% boost for free, effectively. And that is a big deal, especially when you're throwing out stuff that has, 49% buff, 59% buff. Those numbers do add up. Very cool arms, dude. All right, let's check out the legs. With speed attribute, melee crit, ignored. Infighter job, EX skill cooldown reduced by 20%. In a vacuum, that's a really powerful second trait. EX skill cooldown reduced by 20% is the cap outside of Sokai Limited. In fighter job, dime a dozen, super easy to get, especially powerful ones, so this would have been a absolutely no-brainer trait for this type of suit. However, the first trait being melee crit rate, completely useless. You're investing a lot into this part purely for the second trait, but you could most likely find another part within the same pool that has what this does and a better other trait. I wanted for just the second trait. That's a good second trait though. Like, no judging. Cougar Rush. Executed combo using saber in both hands. This animation is not good. Moving right along. Gun. Pew pew. While Xeon job gauge increase boosted 13%. Okay. When melee attack is under 10k, all power boosted by 30%. So this is very friendly for brand new players because having your melee attack under 10k, that's definitely a new player thing. Or potentially a shot build that still has yet to really start flourishing. With that in mind, a 30% all power boost is quite healthy. If you're someone that's able to afford alternating this part, somehow has under 10,000 melee attack, you may want to look at this part just potentially for that 30% all power boost. That will do a lot. What is your thoughts on Tenkaichi coming back to PS5 to Xbox Series X? Okay, so if we're gonna talk about Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi, something to keep in mind is I'm heavily biased. So obviously, I grew up in that age bracket where Dragon Ball Z was airing on television. I got an eye full of that. I do love classic Dragon Ball up to the end of the Cell arc. Good stuff. Beyond that, I played Budokai 2 and 3, Budokai Tenkaichi 2 and 3, and especially Budokai Tenkaichi 2. I played a lot of that at my friend's house on his PS2. We just would sit on his couch and play Dragon Ball Z for hours and hours and hours. I loved Budokai Tenkaichi. I was unbelievably hyped when I saw that trailer. I am super into that. My only concern, my concern for this, right? Okay, so I don't want anyone to take this the wrong way, because I'm really happy with where the Gundam Versus franchise is right now. I like kind of what it's become, but one of the games I loved playing when I was younger was Alliance vs. AF2 Plus, and I've talked about this before. I liked the suit selection. I loved the couch kind of co-op and multiplayer stuff it had. I was a big fan of it. And I've seen where that franchise is now. It turned into Gundam Versus and all of this. And it went from kind of the slower, more deliberate movements, right? That's kind of where you had that branch where you had Battle Operation that went more realistic. And then you had Versus, which went more arcadey. Both of these are fine. But my concern is seeing what happened, an old game that had a very specific engine I loved. Like, I love the way that game worked. I look at Budokai Tenkaichi 2, Tenkaichi 3, they're very similar, cool, direct improvement effectively. I look at the new title and I'm very, very wary that the same thing is going to happen, where they're going to look at Budokai Tenkaichi and turn it into more of like a versus style game where it's more arcadey, more fast paced, more esports friendly. Which again is fine. I understand why those kinds of decisions would be made, and I actually would support that because I just want to see the franchise and the games flourish and do well. Dragon Ball Z doesn't really need a lot of help in that regard, but regardless, I do want to see, these things do well. But that is my big hesitation, wariness point, is seeing what happened to an older game as it kind of grew up. I can see the same thing happening to Budokai Tenkaichi and becoming less what I wanted in a direct sequel and becoming something that's more esports, advertiser friendly kind of deal. And that's really it. I'm hype as all heck for it. There's just that little nagging voice in the back of my head that goes, don't forget what they did to Versus. That's pretty much it, right? Again, not saying Versus is bad. I love playing it. I own copies. It's a thing I do. I play it. It's fun. It's just not the original feeling I got from those older games. It's pretty much it, right? Yeah, if you were working at Bandai, what would you call Tenkaichi 4 reboot Tenkaichi? So it really depends on what the goal is of the game. If they're looking to create an esports friendly title, you just want to go Dragon Ball Z, or even Dragon Ball like Saga Budokai Tenkaichi or something, or Dragon Ball Xenoverse Budokai Tenkaichi. You want to make sure that it's very inviting for new players, people that may have never played these games when they came out when they were younger, or maybe they were too young for these games at all. Whatever, you want to appeal to them. If you're looking to appeal to the Budokai Tenkaichi audience, that's where you go. This is Budokai Tenkaichi 4, or maybe this is like Budokai Tenkaichi Super, Budokai Tenkaichi 3 Super, whatever, right? You have a little more play with that, but it purely depends on the kind of audience you want to aim at, what you kind of want to get out of the game, and what you're targeting, right? So Dragon Ball FighterZ exists. There's no worry about BT4. No. So Budokai turned into FighterZ, or Fighters, however you want to pronounce it. Remember, Budokai and Budokai Tenkaichi, even though they share the root name, Dragon Ball Z Budokai, they were two completely different genres. Budokai was the one-on-one side fighter kind of deal, like you would see in Street Fighter, like you would see in the more classical fighter games. Budokai Tenkaichi said, all right, we want that, but we want way more like interactable environments. We want more authentic Dragon Ball combat, and that's kind of where it branched out into kind of like what Xenoverse is, right? That kind of branching path. So you have Budokai turned into FighterZ, and then you have the Budokai Tenkaichi kind of went into the Xenoverse branch, and now they're kind of rebooting it and bringing it kind of back in. And my biggest concern is they just go full esports with it, and that's fine. I want to have Budokai Tenkaichi 4, not Dragon Ball, Budokai Tenkaichi, and then just have this esports reboot kind of deal. I'd still play it. I'd probably play a lot of it, because holy shit. But it just wouldn't be the same feeling, What's the holdup with G Eternal? So this question, did they cancel the project? Eternal's up in the air. I haven't heard anything about it personally. All I know, to the best of my knowledge, it hasn't been canceled at all. Like, we haven't heard anything about that. We just haven't heard anything about it at all. No news is good news, if you know the saying. Have you heard any news about the new Gundam game for console, remaster, or reboot? The new Gundam for console. I haven't heard anything about a new one, but at the same time, I've been kind of worrying a lot more about focusing on what's currently out, right? We got GBM, we got Gundam Evolution, Eternals coming soon, Battle Operation 2 on Steam, please soon. We have a lot on the plate right now for what's already out. I don't know if there's another Gundam game planned. Like, there probably is. I would not be surprised at all. The IP is massive and only getting bigger. But yeah. Did we finish with this suit? Oh no, we have the shield, and then we're done with the Blue Destiny. So let's do that. Come on. I only got a couple of suits left to look at too. That's nice. All right, so the Blue Destiny Unit 2 shield. When melee attack is over 5,000, enemy special shot power reduced by 25%. Special shot, keep in mind, this is only available to mid-shooter and long-shooter job licenses. This is when you hold down the neutral shot attack button for a few seconds. Every weapon has a different special shot. Beam rifles, you'll do the Wing Gundam kind of tilt back and the big Jirobi beam blast kind of thing that does multiple damage hits. For bazookas, you'll just stand still, charge a big attack, and just has a bigger blast radius and more damage and knockback. So that's special shot. Enemy special shot power reduction, probably not going to see a lot of viability out of this, just because the AI is more likely to blow EX skills or just use the neutrals versus special shot. But again, mileage may vary. While Xeon, enemy melee damage plus 30%. Again, Xeon is kind of a weird tag to put these things under. It makes sense for the suit specifically, but melee damage plus 30% while Xeon feeds well into the Xeon tag itself, but that first trait does kind of put a damper on the whole deal. Second trait, very good. First trait, not good. Pretty much is the long and short of it. Let's not forget UC Engage and IBOG for MOBA adding new stories. Yep. Yeah. Those... The thing with, like, those titles, though, is... I respect that Gundam still is not ubiquitous enough in the West to warrant everything being translated super quickly and getting released here. But it's also kind of a pain point because there's a lot of these titles I really want to play and enjoy, but it can be very difficult to do that when it's not in your native language for one reason or another. Whether it's menu navigation, whether it's features or functionality that are difficult to really get a handle on without the tutorials, which are obviously not in your language, all these other things, and obviously story being a big one. Yeah. UC engages too much gotcha with little gameplay, got bored after 2 months of it. Each to their own. I know people that'll play games that are absolutely trash for the longest time just because they really like the IP or they like one very specific feature of it. For example, I don't know if you guys ever played it, but Ragnarok Online had a mobile game. I don't know if it's still up or not, but it was an idle kind of thing where you effectively just created your character, you picked your job, and you would turn off the game. You'd log back on once a day, and it'd be like, hey, you got this much experience, you got this. It's your typical like AFK game, right? You'd come back, fight a couple of bosses or whatever to increase the level of the zone that you're autoing through, and then you just come back like the next day and just do it again, right? People play that kind of stuff, and that's fine. Whatever people enjoy. I wouldn't really find a lot of value in that. If Tenkaichi is coming, do you think we'll get Federation for Xeon 2 and most are going to come to Xeon Front 2? Man, yeah, Alex, man, thanks for hanging out. So, Hunter, when it comes to reboots, it can be very... Dragon Ball Z, because of Fighter Z, whatever, was on a really big up tilt. A lot of people that may not have normally cared or known about the franchise got a lot of exposure to it because of its activity in the FGC and all the cycling going on there. Gundam really hasn't had a blowout success to that degree. So I don't know if they look at it as Gundam has a lot of potential right now, but if I had to pick, I would 100% love to see a like big reboot of the more classical like Alliance vs. ZAF 2 Plus, like that style of combat and engine and gameplay, which is effectively Gundam Versus, but less arcadey and a little more on the deliberate side of things. Things don't feel as like super snappy. It's still kind of faster paced than what you would expect than like in Battle Operation 2, but yeah. And I also like I just really miss the co-op features of it, like the couch co-op stuff as well. And the multiplayer didn't have to worry about online balancing or stuff or esports, so they just had the most ridiculous mobile suits available to play as, right? That's the kind of stuff that I really enjoy when it comes to my my games, right? Especially Gundam. There's so many mobile suits to pick from all the series. There's so many suits that in lore just ridiculously, which is so much more powerful than everything else. But for the sake of balance in these games, they really have to nerf it from what its lore accurate side is, right? And, you know, that's fine. It just kind of feels like I just miss having overpowered suits that I could dick around as, you know, on couch co-op against some AI bots just to have fun, right? So, outside of that, though, I think Encounters in Space would be really cool to see kind of a modern reboot of. I remember playing the original Encounters in Space. That was a lot of fun. And I would love to see like a really modern reboot of it that kind of goes through different story branches and stuff. I think that'd be pretty neat. That'd be neat. I wouldn't expect it though, because again, unlike Dragon Ball Z, it really just hasn't seen the same exposure recently to the mainstream. Lore accuracy wins Goku versus Superman. It depends on which version of Goku, effectively. Because I think once you get up to like Ultra Instinct Goku, you can't really kill Superman unless you take him, like get him like green kryptonite, but you also can't really kill Goku at that point of Superman. So it's more just like a battle of attrition until Superman gets kryptonite, you know? But yeah, no, it's really difficult to say like what's worth getting a reboot and what's not, because it's really hard to tell what the market's going to like, because it also has a huge, like there's a lot of pressure put on the devs. Like if they made another Federation versus Xeon, like the old Gundam fighting games, there is a lot of like, do they lock it down to a specific series? Like, because for example, even though I didn't play Federation vs. Xeon, the Battle Assault, I did play Gundam Seed Battle Assault and Gundam Seed Destiny Battle Assault. Those games were very focused, obviously, on Seed and Destiny. They had the mobile suits from the franchise, but they also kind of did the Smash Bros. Thing, where in Smash Bros. Melee, you had Roy and Marth, who were like literally, who the heck are you guys picks, right? Gundam Seed Battle Assault had Red Frame, and it was like, who the hell are you? Because if you only watched the Gundam Seed anime, which most people had around that time because the manga wasn't localized, and back then, you know, the internet really wasn't this big ubiquitous web that we have today, the chance of you knowing who the Astray was slim to none, right? And the fact that a sequel came out was also like, I think I only ever saw one copy of Battle Assault 2 with my eyes in my entire life kind of deal, right? With that in mind, right, playing those games, it would be kind of fun, but I just don't know if the Gundam IP would mesh well with it, just because, like, I don't know if only really hardcore fans, I think, would enjoy it. The more fighting game community would be just kind of, I don't know. I just don't think giant mechas are really the thing right now for the FGC. But I could be mistaken completely, honestly. I only know so much about it outside looking in, right? But I think the anime fighters are kind of the big deal right now, more so than mecha fighters. So, anyways, let's take a look at our last two suits here. The Vait, or however you pronounce that, and the Gyagya. All right, so Vait, while Force Space, EX skill piercing boosted by 22%. I've already talked about the Force Space tag. EX skill piercing is effectively how much of the enemy's defense and resistances are you going to ignore before damage application. 22%, relatively, you know, kind of, it's average for what this suit is. I don't think it's really, excuse me, that amazing. I think just stacking like EX skill power, probably the better idea. But if you have a bunch of like double S minus power skills that have D pierce, maybe EX skill piercing might be a good idea. While for space, initial EX skill charge boosted by 20%. So this is kind of an interesting symbiosis. If you have the for space word tag active, you're seeing a 20% initial skill charge boost as well as a 22% piercing boost. Feeds into each other, kind of cool. Again, I'm just not really sure how to feel about the piercing, but overall, okay. Torso. There we go. With technique attribute, again, locking us into the attribute here. EX skill piercing boosted by 22%. Okay, well, as far as what I just talked about, still stands, hasn't changed in the last 30 seconds. When attacking with beam, shooting power boosted by 40%. 40% is a very high modifier. That sits at, I think, like the third or fourth highest boost, because you got like 45%, 50%, and I think we saw one higher than that. Probably mistaken though. Anyways, beam, super accessible, available through tons of different EX skills, parts, all sorts of stuff. No issue there. 40% is a high modifier. With the EX skill piercing boost, again, this is kind of symbiotic, a lot like the previous part, where shooting power, as Mana pointed out, does also boost your EX skill damage for shot EXs only, obviously. So you get the shooting power boost and the EX skill pierce boost, can kind of feed into each other there. Again, a lot like the head. Neat. Not an amazing part, but all right. arms. When attacking with beam, special shot power. Okay, I'm just not even going to worry about that. I already talked about special shot. Just not really worth investing into, honestly. Long shooter job. So this refers to the job license. Enemy shooting damage plus 35%. So I can see where this kind of feeds into each other here. If you're using a long shooter job license and you have a special shot beam, you get the 25% boost of the shot power as well as the just shooting damage 35% boost. Kind of nice. Second trait, very good. First trait, I'm not really a big fan of. It's okay. Yeah, the first traits are just really half-baked, but the second traits, like you said, they're solid second traits down the board so far. All right, when shot attack is over 5k, that's a rounding error, let's be real. Long shot attack rate. Okay, so what this is referring to is the distance between you and your target. If you go back, if you're interested, I should say, you can go back and look at one of the very first videos I did on Gundam GBM, back then known as GBGW. The distance between you and your enemy is displayed via a reticle when you're locking onto your opponent for long range, medium range, close range, and obviously out of range. With that in mind, what this is referring to is when you are in that long range attack bracket, you get a 14% attack boost on your neutral abilities, or your neutral shot, I should say. However, it should be noted that certain weapons also get a damage buff within these different brackets. If, for example, you're using an SMG, that gets a bonus at close range. If you're using a beam rifle or a bazooka, that's medium range. If you're using a rifle, like a sniper rifle, that is a long range boost, right? And all of these kind of feed into each other. This, I don't think is really that useful just because after a certain point, you don't really use neutral attacks anyways. You're just spamming EX skills left and right. So for a very early game player that's using a sniper rifle or a beam rifle, the shot machine effectively, this might be very useful in niche situations where you're at a long distance from your opponent and using your neutral, but it is also only a 14% boost. Not really that big. And when operated on auto, this only works if you are controlling the suit and it is set to auto. This does not work if it is an AI controlled opponent that you don't have direct control of set on auto. And you get an EX skill cooldown reduced 25%. The cooldown reduction is really good. The auto requirement's kind of restrictive, unfortunately. If you run this pawn on your ally, oh, does it? The last I heard about this, Mana, is that it only actually works if you're manually controlling the suit and it's set to auto. Obviously, right, I could be mistaken. It's been a very long time since a lot of this stuff was really like implemented and all these any in-game help was written about it. But from what I understood, this only worked if you were controlling the suit itself and you had your game set to auto. Otherwise, it counts as AI, not auto or something. Anyways, long and short, it does require auto play. It doesn't. At the end of if you are able to use it on your support suits and it does count as auto, could be very useful, as a 25% cooldown reduction can be a big deal. That's a quarter of it gone. However, if it can't, that means you can only really run it on like your primary suit effectively, set on auto. A lot like the rest of the suit, the first trait is a wash, but the second trait is either really good or sounds really interesting. I don't think it's worth it though. Just because you're investing a ton for the second trait when the first trait is just really useless. And yeah. The second trait has potential to be very good in very specific situations, but with that first trait being a wash, you could probably just do better with another part that does a cooldown reduction of like 20% and gives you a better first or secondary trait that does something else good. Hey, Alan. So, yeah, I don't know. All right, and lastly, the backpack is the beam cannon, A+ pierce, B+ power, medium cooldown. Sounds straightforward enough. I'd have to see the animation, but it just sounds like point and shoot. That's typically good. All right, and lastly, the Gyaga, well, our Gyaga. I like that the Centurion spike thing it's got going on. Always like that. I guess it's more of a plume than a spike. The Centurion head bit. All right. When C power is over 150,000, very easy to do. Shooting damage taken reduced by a flat 20. Okay, that's really showing the age of this one here. While close combat, enemy melee damage plus 30%. Second trait, very, very good. First trait, yeah, no. It's one of those cases where it's like, I really want to like it, but the second trait is really good. The first trait is just not worth it. And the problem is, right, like, to get that second trait, you do have to invest in the part. I just don't know if it's worth it, really. With Twin Blade category equipped, EX skill piercing boosted by 22%. Twin Blades are relatively common nowadays, so okay. Infighter job, EX skill piercing boosted by 28%. So this is interesting. If you're running an Infighter and your main hand weapon is a Twin Blade, you get a 50% piercing boost. So that's actually kind of significant if you're running only like power-based skills and they all have really bad pierce. This could help a significant amount, all things considered. So food for thought, even on like really high-end suits, this could be pretty useful. Obviously, got to be Infighter, got to have the Twin Blades, but 50% skill piercing boost on one part. Arms. Shield missiles, B plus power, D pierce, launch missiles. I don't really have much else to say about that. It looks bog standard, good stuff. Legs. Penetrate. D pierce, A minus power, kind of a low cooldown here. Unleash a thrusting attack with the saber at your waist. This has to be intentional, right? Anyways, it just sounds like the animation is going to be something easy to dodge, break out of, disjoint. I wouldn't. Zero shot attack arms. Yeah. So that's interesting because it's got a physical shot EX skill and then it's got zero shot attack on the arms. It's an interesting decision. But that's where you get offset with other parts, or you just use it as your custom skin on the front to get access to the EX skill. All right. Backpack. With melee power, with power attribute, melee power boosted by 25%. So again, traps you into the attribute triangle, but 25% melee power boost, it's pretty good. And with saber category equipped, debuff EX skill effect up 22%. So any debuffs you have, again, you're just adding a flat 22% onto it. This is an interesting one. Unlike the other two suits where first trait bad, second trait good, this is one of those cases where first trait good, second trait not so much. Very interesting. All right, let's check out our twin saber here, or twin blade. Royal Heart, D pierce, A minus power, thrust your charged sword to cleave cleanly. Lowers hit enemies gunpla beam resist by 29%. Okay, so I'm pretty sure the animation on this is weak. I'd have to see it again, but just based on the description, it just sounds like something that's going to be easy to whiff, dodge, not hit. And on paper, while it looks nice, A minus power, D pierce. If you have issues landing it, or you have the gap close or whatever, you're really asking for it at that point. As with all Heart EX, it's dash into the spin. Yeah. A lot like what I said previously for the Valiant Heart, right? You'll use it at a lower like end gameplay, but once you get up to a certain point, you're just shelving it for something that's better. Whether it's a yeet, whether it's a bindable, whether it's a charge with a like a mini cutscene. Anyways, last thing here, the Beam Saber. 21% of attacks penetrating super armor, so that means whenever you hit the enemy, there's effectively a 1 in 5 chance they're going to stagger. This can be very useful for when you fight enemies that have super armor and do not stagger at all. This, obviously can let you combo them. And then the second ability here, 26% chance of attacks penetrating super armor, totaling 47% overall. More or less, you have a 1 in 2 chance, 50% of whenever you hit the enemy, they stagger, whether they have super armor or not. This has a very niche application. There's very few scenarios in which you actually need to stagger your opponent or would have the need to stagger your opponent. So this is going to be very like limited usage, but in those very small scenarios, it'll do its work. Outside of that, though, not really. Overall, very interesting alterations. I do like the new the head alteration for the Shinmusha. That was actually really cool. 70% all power reduction is quite nice. The Blue Destiny arms, for example, those are also pretty cool. Yeah, and obviously Rampage on the Scramble torso. And yeah, I think it was the backpack on the F90 with that very interesting B+, B+. Yeah, no, the alterations were quite interesting this time. Our Gacha suit, the Blitz, was pretty interesting. Didn't really, I think, capitalize on Mirage Colloid like I hoped it would. Yeah. Anyways, gang, with that, I'm going to wrap up. It's already past midnight. I do need to sleep eventually. As always, thanks for tuning in, hanging out, all that fun stuff. I will be back in a couple of weeks for the next GBM content drop, or sooner if there's some kind of emergency suit drop or something. Outside of that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.